Greetings, shimmering Systrum blessings, my sisters. My name is Tahya. That's an Egyptian name that means greetings or welcome. So I'm really excited to share this presentation with you. It took me on a journey learning new things. Of course, as I'm sure you all know, any dive into ancient Egyptian history is going to result in a very deep dive and one which is difficult to resurface from. But at any rate, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, Yeshe. Thank you to the Mount Shasta Goddess Temple for inviting me to be among the presenters at Cosmogenetics 2025. Whew, 2025, wow. So let's begin with my slideshow. I know I heard you say that you've seen a lot of slides today, so your eyes might be getting a little tired, but I hope the beauty of these ancient Egyptian artifacts will revive you. So this brief lecture will focus on the divine triads of ancient Egypt and the goddess Hathor and her representation in divine triads. Now I'd like to begin by saying it was nearly 20 years ago since I first traveled to Egypt, and it was at the temple dedicated to the goddess Hathor, where I had what I can only describe as an awakening. The earth somewhat trembled beneath my feet, and I was nearly brought to my knees as tears streamed down my face. When I regained my composure, I wandered around the temple grounds, and I was blessed to take this picture of this beautiful goddess Hathor. Little did I know what would unfold upon my return back to the States. Now, as many of you know who have also been blessed to explore the ancient temples throughout the land of Kemet, imagery of queens, kings, goddesses, priests, priestesses, and chantresses playing the Systrum can be seen nearly everywhere, and yet at that time, back in 2007, no replicas were available to tourists. All that was available were those carefully shelved in museum cases. Long story short, I have no explanation. I have no idea why I was chosen, but in 2007, the goddess Hathor commissioned me to re-emerge the Systrum in the 21st century. And you may be saying, well, how did that happen? And all I can tell you is that I felt a gentle tapping on my shoulder and a whispering in my ears. Thus began my investigation of ancient artifacts and written documentation about the use of the Systrum to inform my design, which ultimately then led to the manufacture of a beautiful instrument and the subsequent lectures in which I share the information compiled by my research focused on the use of the Systrum in association with the goddess Hathor. And one of the most exquisite images of Hathor that I found was the next image, a representation of Hathor seated alongside King Menkaure. More about this sculpture in a moment. But I will share it with you here so you can see how impressive and inspiring she appears. In his 2012 paper titled Divine Triads of Ancient Egypt by Universidad Aberta ancient history professor Jose Salas, we are told, and I quote, "The divine triads are a very common type of group within the organization of the pantheon of ancient Egyptian religion, often regarded as constituting a unit, combining the concepts and the symbolism of three and one, and sometimes seen as transforming polytheism in tritheism and monotheism." and having influenced the Christian formula of the Trinity's doctrine. However, despite the fact that the word triad rarely appears in Egyptian texts, the triads were in fact very common in Egypt. For example, most of you are familiar, I am sure, with the triad of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, Ptah, Sekhmet, and Nefertum, Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, and Hathor, Horus, and Ihi. As I'm sure you all know, triad refers to a group of 3 figures. In ancient Egypt, there were a number of triads. Again, I just listed a few, and these triads mostly consist of gods and goddesses, and sometimes also significant kings. In this picture, we see an extremely precious solid gold and lapis lazuli item of pendant jewelry that belonged to a king of the 22nd dynasty, dating back to approximately 872 BCE. It represents the holy triad of the Osiris family. The 3 solid figures represent Osiris in the middle, surrounded by his son Horus and his wife Isis. Horus and Isis extend their hands toward Osiris's shoulder in a protective gesture. Excuse me. In this frame, we see the king Ramses III standing in front of the Memphis triad, Ptah, his consort Sekhmet, and Nefertum. King Ramses III is depicted in full regalia before the holy family of the ancient city of Memphis. Memphis was a city and capital of ancient Egypt and an important center during much of Egyptian history, located south of the Nile River Delta on the west bank of the river, about 15 miles south of modern Cairo. This image is depicted in the Harris papyrus. At 41 meters, it is the longest known papyrus from Egypt, with some 1,500 lines of text. Also from the Harris papyrus, we see a representation of the Theban triad, the 3 divine personalities, Amun, the goddess Mut, and their son god Khonsu. These 3 deities were most popular in the region of Thebes, now known as Luxor. The pharaohs of the 18th and 25th dynasties showed huge respect for this triad. Amun, king of the gods and goddesses, the main member of the Theban triad. People in Thebes widely worshipped him. Ancient Egyptians believed that Amun was the king of gods and goddesses. The meaning of his name is the hidden one. Mut, the divine mother goddess, consort of Amun, and Khonsu, god of the moon, child of Amun and Mut. Now in this picture, we see a high priest of Amun named Ramses Nacht. He served as a high priest of Amun from the reigns of Ramses IV until that of Ramses IX. Here, he is seen donating a statue of the Theban family, Amun seated in the middle, wearing tall feathers on his flat-topped crown. To his left, the goddess Mut, and the other side, his son Khonsu. Horus, Hathor, and Ihi, the divine triad of Dendera, is carved in sunk relief on the south exterior wall of the temple dedicated to the goddess Hathor. Ihi is represented as a child in the typical Egyptian way. He is naked and wears a side lock of hair, barely visible indicative of his youth. Appropriate to his role as the uniter of two lands, he wears the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. In his left hand, he holds a sistrum, the rattle-like instrument used to ward off evil spirits. The sistrum was especially associated with his mother, Hathor, goddess of love and music. In his right hand, he holds a manat, also associated with Hathor, the beaded collar necklace with counterpoise, which could also serve as a percussion instrument. And I realize that it's very difficult to see these things in this particular image, but I invite you to visit my website and see some of the other lectures that I've offered where I go into greater beautiful pictures of both of these instruments. Hathor is pictured here as a woman wearing a crown of cow horns, holding a sun disk. Horus, god of the sky, combines the body of a man with the head of a falcon, and he too is wearing the double crown of Egypt. Professor Salas tells us, again, and I quote, on one hand, we have the tritheistic structure, in other words, a family group based on the criteria abundance or royal, a god father, a mother goddess, and a god son. With the tritheistic structure, the normal Egyptian triad represents three deities and family associated. Deity and the god son, the minor, and the other occupied by the mother goddess. In the vast majority of cases, the main god is male, and the third element of the divine family is a god son. This preference for male offspring may be related to the several mythical stories that emphasize the inheritance and the succession from father to son. Hahowever, there are some variations, again, as I'm sure you are all well aware. At Dendera, we have Hathor, Horus, and Ihi. And at Philae, we have Isis, Osiris, and Horus. And I couldn't resist also sharing this. In an upper register of one of the columns at the Mammoth at Dendera, together with her son Ihi, playing the sistrum and manat, a little bit more visible in this picture, I'm sure you will agree. Among her many epithets, Hathor is the goddess of joy, love, music, and dancing, and her devotees celebrate her rich, generative powers through rhythm and chants of adoration. There's also a subgroup of triads with a male god and a pair of goddesses. For example, Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys. And here we see the chantress Nani offering praise to Osiris, with Isis and Nephthys standing behind the seated deity. Again, I couldn't resist also sharing with you this lovely image of the chantress Nani offering prayers with her sistrum in hand. As was customary during the Third Intermediate Period, Nani's funerary equipment included a hollow wooden Osiris figure which contained her papyrus scroll inscribed with spells from a collection of texts called the Book of Coming Forth by Day, today more commonly referred to by its modern name, the Book of the Dead. When unrolled, her scroll is more than 17 feet long. Also included among the ancient Egyptian triad subgroups are the triads of Menkaure, exemplifying a pharaoh between two deities. Menkaure was a king of the 4th dynasty of Egypt during the Old Kingdom, successor of his older brother Jedefre, who succeeded their father, Khafra, who was the son of Khufu, whom I'm sure you probably all know is renowned for commissioning the building of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Menkaure is famous for his tomb, the smallest of the three pyramids at Giza, and these triad statues, which showed him consistently alongside the goddess Hathor and various regional deities. Here we see Menkaure flanked by the goddess Hathor and the personification of the nome of Upper Egypt Province number 7, now known as Hu. In ancient times, the capital of the 7th province of Upper Egypt, or the 7th nome of Upper Egypt, was referred to as Sesheshet, or Systrum land. I especially love this sublime image of Hathor holding hands with Menkaure. Here we see a photo of two of the triad statues of King Menkaure, where the Valley Temple in Giza, when the area was excavated in 1908 by the Harvard University and Museum of Fine Arts expedition. Amazingly, these 5,000-year-old statues were found completely intact, not at all damaged. These four triads of Menkaure, approximately 3 to 4 feet tall, were discovered by Egyptologist George Reisner in the Valley Temple of Menkaure near his pyramid at Giza. Although not all 8 were uncovered at the time, it is believed that there were 8 triads, as there were 8 places allocated for them in the 8 corridors of the temple. And again, all of the triads include the goddess Hathor standing alongside the king. Wearing her headdress of cow horns, holding the sun disk, the enthroned goddess Hathor, the king's divine mother and protector, embraces Menkaure in a gesture of affection. On the other side of the goddess is the representation of the hair nome, personified as a female figure with a distinctive rabbit standard on her head. Professor Salas summarizes his paper saying, "The Egyptian gods, the Neteru, do not reveal themselves, so to grasp their nature, attributes, experiences, and historical performance, it is necessary to understand the human theoretical constructions developed around them, and in this sense it is undisputed that the plural becomes a unit, associated to a triad as a method of giving order to the pantheon, to correlate deities, and to convey and emphasize their functions. In this sense, the divine triad addresses the issue of tension between the empirical multiplicity and unity of the divine pantheon. The triad is a symbol, namely the manifestation of a human attempt to make an element of the divine world conceivable in human terms." End quote. And as an aside, another image I couldn't resist sharing with you and talking about is Menkaure's cousin, so also a grandchild of Khufu. Again, you will remember he was the one who commissioned the building of the Great Pyramid. This is a bust of Neferheptus, who is the earliest confirmed priestess of Hathor. The priestess of Hathor was called Him-Neter Hathor, a priestess title for those women that served the goddess Hathor in the temple of Dendera. It is estimated that there were about 400 priestesses employed in the service at this temple for Hathor, and their improvement was the greatest during the reign of Pharaoh Menkaure. History informs us that the ancient Egyptian goddess was the patron goddess of women and beauty. This ancient Egyptian goddess, Hathor, presided over the feminine arts of adornment, enchantment, and lovemaking. She was an immensely popular and influential goddess about whom Egyptologist Geraldine Pinch writes, Hathor was the golden goddess who helped women to give birth, the dead to be reborn, and the cosmos to be renewed. She was most commonly known as a beautiful woman wearing a solar disk between a pair of cow's horns. Hathor was a solar deity and feminine counterpart to the sun gods Horus and Ra. She was a member of the divine entourage that accompanied Ra as he sailed through the sky in the solar bark, a method of transportation for the afterlife. In the coffin text, spell 61, Hathor is the goddess in charge of steering the bark, and her importance is demonstrated in this passage as it is a monumental responsibility to transport the deceased in their journey of reaching eternal life. In spell 61, the deceased is referred to as fair is your rising, like the rising of Ra. You shine like Hathor. She is called the Golden One, referring to the radiance of the sun, and texts from her temple at Dendera say, her rays illuminate the whole earth. Adoration to you, Golden One, she who shines like gold in the temple of Systrum. We rejoice to see her rays, Hathor the Great. May Hathor, mistress of music, lady of the Systrum, bring melody, harmony, vibrant good health, peace, and love into your life, and sing your praises. So I conclude now with an invitation. I hope that you will join me in shimmering the Systrum in a 3-count rhythm pattern, which I hope you will find easy and utilize in your daily life to invoke blessings. Oh, are we running out of time?
We are just at the end of time, but I'd love to hear this 3 rhythm. We have some rattles and we're ready to go. So
okay, so I'll be really quick. I just want to invite you all to get a feel of a pulse. So I just want to invite you to pulse right, left, right, left. So you're just kind of maybe tapping your heel on the floor. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And then we're going to put a little clap in the space between 2 and 1 at the end of the pattern. And we're going to put a clap there. So as we tap our heels on the floor, I want you to take your hands and kind of slap your lap. So you have 1, 2, 1, 2, slap, slap, clap, slap, slap, clap, slap, slap, clap, slap, slap, clap. And then for those of you that do have something to shake, rattle, or roll, you can take that same rhythm pattern, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and just do a little gentle flick of your wrists, 1, 2, our drum and sistrum. We play the rhythm for her ka. We dance her grace. She is Our Lady of Systrum. Hathor, Hathor. Lady of delight, mistress of music, queen of song and salutations, lady of all beauty, Hathor, Hathor, Dua, Hathor, Dua, Hathor. Shimmer.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Um,
you. My pleasure.
I have one quick question before we go that I got very curious about, which was um, those set of 8 triads that were found intact, right?
I
They're
knew you were going to ask
amazing.
me that.
And I wondered if you felt like there was anything in that sacred 8 number that harkened back to the Odd, the primordial creator beings that came in also a set, but they came in as 8 sets of 2, but in those triads, it almost felt like there was 8 sets of 2 plus the deity.
Plus the king.
Or plus the king rather, 8 sets of 2 plus the king. So it almost just felt, I don't know, something about that, the 8.
I know. It stood out for me too, but I didn't get any further with my thoughts on that. I just found it really interesting because I was so fascinated by the exquisite sculptures themselves that I really dove into looking for good images of the sculptures and also learning about how they were excavated and where they were found and where they're currently located, and also being incredibly enamored with knowing that Menkaure had such an affection for the goddess Hathor that each of those sculptures include a representation of her and then a representation of the deity associated with the precinct. It wasn't until, just a couple days ago that I found out that there were believed to be 8 of those triads. To the best of my knowledge, there have only been 5, I think, that have been uncovered. So I don't know what happened to the other 3. Uh, but I did find it very interesting that there's believed to be 8 because there were 8 corridors, and I thought somebody's going to ask me about that, and I won't have an answer.
Well, no worries. I just, very, very fascinating. And thank you so, so much.
Thank you.